before the storms of the final twilight, before the clash of gods and giants that the skalds whispered about in their long winter songs. There was a world suspended in a delicate stillness, a world where the chill of the north brushed against the warmth of hearth fires, and where tales moved as softly as drifting snowflakes, carried from one hall to another, lingering in the minds of men, women, and children as they closed their eyes at night. Imagine yourself entering one of those halls now, where the glow of torches flickers against wooden beams, where the sound of the sea outside is muted by the thickness of carved walls, and where a story older than memory begins to unfold like the steady unrolling of a tapestry woven in twilight colors. The Norse myths, those echoes from the edge of the known world, are not stories to be hurried through. They are meant to be listened to slowly, like the rhythm of the waves against a fjord, or the steady heartbeat of the earth itself beneath layers of snow. And as we drift into this narrative together, you may allow your body to relax, your breathing to deepen, and your mind to surrender to the wide, timeless currents of the sagas. The world before Ragnarok was not quiet, though it may seem so when told in hushed tones. It was alive with tension, with gods and giants measuring each other across invisible boundaries, with men feeling the brush of destiny in the shape of dreams, with seers gazing into fires and hearing the cracking of branches that foretold storms yet to come. But here, in this first moment of our long journey, we do not leap ahead to battles and endings. Instead, we linger in the great pause before the storm, in the stillness where every shadow and every whisper held meaning. This is the world of Yggdrasil, the great ash tree that bound together the 9 realms. Its roots deep in mystery, its branches brushing against the dome of the sky. Beneath its shade, frost and flame had once met, creating life out of nothingness. And beneath its shade, the fate of all that existed was being quietly measured. Let us walk slowly, as if across a snow-covered meadow, toward this tree of eternity, and let us listen. Do you hear the trickle of water from the well of Ord, where the Norns sit weaving destiny? Each drop that falls into the well is like a heartbeat, each ripple extending outward into realms of gods, men, elves, and creatures no longer named. To the Norse, life was never random. It was a fabric woven from threads of inevitability, and though one might tug against them, they always pulled back with quiet certainty. The Norns sat at their task, shaping futures even of those who believed themselves most powerful. Odin himself, the Allfather, bowed before their silent work, and Thor, with all his thunder, could not shatter what they decreed. And so, as you drift deeper into this narrative, you can almost see their hands, pale in the glow of otherworldly light, moving endlessly, weaving and weaving without rest. But do not worry. This is not a story of dread, not yet. This is a story of ancient calm, of the world breathing before its destiny comes to claim it. The Norse people lived with winters that pressed down like a hand of ice, with seas that could swallow whole fleets, with skies that cracked open in lightning and storms, and so their myths, too, carried this weight. Yet in the telling there was also warmth, the warmth of voices carrying tales across long nights, the warmth of ale poured into carved cups, the warmth of knowing that even if the end would one day come, there was beauty in the waiting. In this moment, as you listen, you may feel that same warmth surrounding you, holding you, as though you too were resting in the hall of a longhouse, hearing these sagas whispered near the fire, safe against the snowstorm that howls outside. The world before Ragnarok stretched wide, Asgard with its shining halls, Midgard with its mortal struggles, Jotunheim with its towering giants, Alfheim with its ethereal light, Svartalfheim with its deep caverns, Helheim with its shadows. and other realms that clung to the branches and roots of Yggdrasil, like jewels in the vastness of night. Each realm had its stories, its whispers of coming fate, and yet each realm continued in its own rhythm, unhurried, as though unaware, perhaps pretending not to be aware of, the great shadow on the horizon. This rhythm is what we step into now, the hum of life before the end, the steady pulse of a cosmos not yet broken. Breathe with me as you imagine the halls of Valhalla, where the warriors feasted and laughed, knowing that they were only waiting for the horn that would summon them. Breathe again as you see the quiet glades where elves danced under silver light, unaware or deliberately ignoring that their joy would one day be pierced. Breathe once more as you picture the seas stretching into mist, filled with serpents unseen, waves hiding things best left unnamed. This breathing carries you further into the story, further into the myth, and further into your own rest, as the sound of the words becomes like a tide that moves you toward sleep. And now, as we linger in this threshold, before the sagas truly unfurl, allow yourself to drift deeper. Imagine the voice of an ancient skald, steady, patient, never rushing, speaking not to excite, but to soothe, to let the story expand like mist over water. His words are not sharp or hurried. They are soft, wrapping around you like wool. He invites you not just to hear, but to feel, not just to imagine, but to breathe the story as though it were air itself. And as his voice merges with mine, and mine with the rhythm of your own breathing, you find yourself immersed in a space both ancient and timeless, both far away and within you. This is only the beginning of our journey through the world before Ragnarok. There are many halls yet to enter, many shadows yet to explore, many fires yet to warm yourself beside. For now, let the first embers glow gently in your mind, and let them guide you into relaxation. The Norse believed that stories were not merely entertainment. They were living companions, guiding dreams, carrying wisdom, and bringing comfort. Tonight, these stories are your companions too. And if this journey of words has begun to ease your mind and slow your heart, you are welcome to linger with us for many nights more. If you wish, softly, in your own time, you may like this video. Leave a gentle comment with your thoughts, share it with others who might also need rest, and subscribe so that more stories, more sagas, more journeys can find their way to you. There is no rush, no demandly an invitation, carried as softly as a breeze across the fjords. For now, the story continues, the night deepens, and you are safe within the weaving of myth. Block 2, the birth of the first beings. In the endless quiet that stretches like a veil between waking thought and the tender embrace of dreams, allow yourself to drift deeper into the mist of time, where stories do not simply live on parchment but breathe through the echoes of fire and frost. Close your eyes a little more, let the rhythm of your breathing soften, and picture a vast, primordial nothingness, a place not bound by the ticking of clocks nor the divisions of days and nights, but a realm called Ginnungagap, the yawning void, the great and silent expanse that existed before the world, before the stars, before even memory itself. It is here that the tale unfolds, slowly, gently, in the kind of pace that lulls the mind towards stillness, like the steady movement of waves upon a shore, retreating and returning without urgency. In this space of calm imagination, where only the hum of your own breath exists, you may begin to feel as though you are entering into that ancient gap, carried on the steady current of timeless narration. Within Ginnungagap, two great forces pressed against the silence, like two vast tides that never fully collided but always lingered at the edges of each other. To the north lay Niflheim, a realm of frost, where cold spread endlessly, its breath heavy with ice, its winds biting, its rivers flowing as streams of frozen poison, and its heart marked by the well called Yggdrasil, from which many rivers of icy venom poured forth. To the south burned Muspelheim, the land of fire, a place untamed and glowing, filled with sparks that danced like living embers, where the guardian Surt stood with his flaming sword, ready to sweep the cosmos in fire when the appointed time would one day arrive. Between these poles of existence, the void remained empty, silent, and vast, until the great heat of Muspelheim reached across the stillness and kissed the frost of Niflheim. Slowly, drop by drop, a melting began. Ice wept into water, steam rose in delicate veils, and from this mingling of fire and frost, life began to stir. Imagine now, in your relaxed mind, a single drop of water falling into a pool. It ripples outward, soft and unhurried. So too did the mingling of fire and frost ripple outward across Ginnungagap, creating the first forms, the beginnings of shape and substance in the void. And from these shapes, the first being emerged, immense and strange, known as Ymir, the primordial giant, a creature born not of mother or father, but of the collision of opposites, a body that was at once terrifying and wondrous. Ymir lay within the thawing ice, vast in size, his breath heavy and slow, filling the empty gap with a new sound, the sound of life itself. His body was raw creation, unfinished, and from his sweating form more beings arose, strange and shadowed, born from the warmth that seeped from his flesh. From his armpits grew the first of the frost giants, and from the mingling of his legs another being came forth. These children of Ymir spread, multiplying in the shadows of the void, filling it with movement and presence where once only silence had rested. But the story of beginnings does not rest with Ymir alone, for, as the frost continued to melt beneath the gentle caress of Muspelheim's fire, another form took shape within the ice. This was a great cow, named Autumla, vast and nurturing, whose body was a fountain of life. She licked at the salty ice blocks for sustenance, her tongue carving slow pathways across the frozen surface. And from her teats flowed 4 rivers of milk, enough to feed Ymir and sustain him in his growth. In this strange and dreamlike landscape, one may picture Ymir, immense and breathing, lying in the void, fed by the rivers of milk flowing from Autumla, while she, in turn, continued her patient task of licking the ice. And as she licked, shapes began to emerge, first faint, then clearer, until at last, from the ice arose a figure unlike the giants, a man of beauty and strength named, stood tall and radiant, the first of the gods, carved slowly from the frost by Autumla's patient tongue. He was the ancestor from whom the race of the Aesir would one day descend. From him came Bor, and Bor would take a wife from among the giants, Bestla, and together they would have children, 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Venoms, that would echo across the vast saga of creation, shaping the destiny of the cosmos. But for now, in this moment of early emergence, it was enough that the silence of Ginnungagap had been broken, and that forms, beings, and families were slowly unfolding in its once empty embrace. As you listen, perhaps you feel the slow rhythm of this tale weaving into the rhythm of your own body. The quiet meeting of fire and frost reflecting the quiet balance of breath entering and leaving. The story flows like a gentle current, without urgency, carrying you deeper into its expanse. Each image is not a demand on your attention, but a resting place, a soft point of focus that allows the weight of the day to slip a little further away. Ymir, vast and heavy, is like the heaviness in your limbs as you begin to drift. Autumla, patiently licking the ice, is like the slow persistence of your heartbeat. The emergence of is like the quiet promise of dawn in the distance, a shape forming where once there was only shadow. And so, in this tender beginning, the stage is set, not in haste, not in thunder or lightning, but in the patient mingling of fire and frost, of opposites finding harmony in the void. This is how the first beings came to be, how the first threads of the Norse cosmos were woven into the fabric of the yawning gap. It is the sound of something stirring where once there was only silence, and the sound lingers like a soft murmur in the background of your thoughts, carrying you further into a place of rest, deeper into the story, and deeper still into the quiet. Block 3. As we continue along this gentle path through the timeless expanse of Norse mythology, the world before Ragnarok stretches before us like an immense tapestry woven of twilight threads, subtle and glowing, where every fiber carries the memory of ancient winters and every hue shimmers with whispers of gods, giants, and unseen destinies. The atmosphere is quiet, as if the stars themselves hesitate to shine too brightly, preferring instead to bathe the 9 realms in a subdued glow, soft as candlelight behind thin veils. You may let your breathing grow deeper here, slow and steady, as the myths unfold, not as fiery declarations, but as drifting currents that rock you gently toward the edges of slumber, where the voice of the sagas becomes a lullaby rather than a battle cry. The Norse cosmos, before the trembling signs of Ragnarok began to emerge, is described as vast and balanced, though the balance is precarious, suspended between opposing forces that exist not in harmony but in quiet tension, a stillness that always suggests movement to come. Picture Yggdrasil, the great world tree, its roots stretching into realms unseen, its branches arching like pillars across the dome of the heavens. The roots whisper of frost and fire, of the cold mists of Niflheim curling endlessly in the abyss of Gingop, and of Muspelheim's eternal flames shimmering faintly at the other edge of creation. Beneath the tree's vast crown, the worlds hang like lanterns on threads of starlight, their stories interconnected, their fates entwined. It is here, in this suspended breath before the storm, that the Norse imagination lingers, savoring each quiet moment before the inevitability of destruction. The 9 realms themselves are vast landscapes of mystery and calm before chaos. Midgard, the world of humans, lies encircled by the endless serpent Jormungandr, who coils silently beneath the oceans, waiting with patience older than mountains. High above, Asgard glimmers like a fortress of dawn, its halls echoing not only with the feasts and boasts of gods, but also with the hushed awareness that every banquet is one closer to the last. In the shadowy places of Jotunheim, the giants roam, their steps heavy but their voices distant, like thunder heard across a valley, still harmless until storms gather. Vanaheim breathes with fertile ease, home to the Vanir deities of growth and cycles, their presence as soft as the wind passing through fields, promising yet transient. In Alfheim, the light elves weave radiance into the fabric of existence, their glow delicate, shimmering like morning mist kissed by the first rays of sun. Svartalfheim, or Nidavellir, deep beneath the stone, hums quietly with the ceaseless work of dwarves, whose hammers strike rhythms older than language, crafting treasures and secrets that slumber in vaults of earth. Niflheim exhales its endless mists and chills, while Muspelheim flickers with heat and brilliance just beyond the horizon of fear. Helheim, the resting place of many souls, is shrouded in calm shadows, not yet stirred by the call of doom, a realm of quiet waiting, where stillness itself becomes a form of eternity. The time before Ragnarok is filled with this tension between stillness and foreboding, a silence like the breath before thunder. Yet for now, the world lingers in its cycles. The sun and moon drift steadily across the sky, chased by wolves whose pursuit is tireless but not yet complete. The rivers run, the seasons change, and humans tell stories around fires to remember their place within a world greater than themselves. It is in this world of waiting that myth gathers its power, for every quiet night beneath the stars, every hush between winds, is colored by the awareness that it will one day end. To imagine this era is to feel yourself moving slowly across vast landscapes of myth, where even the most fearsome presences are subdued by distance and by time's unhurried pace. Odin sits in Asgard, pondering from his high seat Hlidskjalf, where he can gaze across all the realms. His thoughts are deep and unspoken, as if he too knows that foresight is a burden. And yet he allows his eye to rest gently upon the worlds, not rushing toward their conclusion, but drinking in their fleeting beauty. Thor patrols the skies, his hammer silent for the moment, resting in readiness rather than roaring in battle. Freya tends to her hall, her presence soft and protective, guiding the passage of souls as though weaving threads into an unseen loom. Each god carries within their heart the awareness of what is to come, but in this time before Ragnarok, they live as if eternity still breathes. The myths of this twilight world tell us not only of warriors and prophecies, but also of quiet moments, of mead shared in golden halls, of stories told at the fireside, of journeys across the Bifrost rainbow bridge shimmering faintly between realms. These are the gentle rhythms that define existence before it collapses, the soft sounds of life continuing under the shadow of destiny. The sagas linger here deliberately, for the Norse imagination treasures not only the storm, but also the calm that makes the storm meaningful. In your mind's eye, let this world expand like a dream that stretches wider the more you surrender to it. Picture yourself drifting through the branches of Yggdrasil, hearing the faint murmur of the Norns as they weave fate by the well of Erod. Their whispers neither urgent nor rushed, but steady, inevitable, like the flowing of water. Time in this space feels less like a river and more like a tide, ebbing and returning, carrying stories on its surface like driftwood. The world before Ragnarok is not hurried, and so you too may let go of any need for hurry, letting the rhythm of these stories pull you deeper into rest. It is in this suspended state that the myths themselves were cherished, passed from one generation to the next, not as frantic warnings, but as steady companions through long winters and endless nights. To the Norse people, the awareness of Ragnarok did not diminish life. It enriched it, reminding them to hold their moments closely, to celebrate their fires, to honor their bonds. In the telling and retelling of these stories, there is a slow and steady comfort, much like the one you may feel now as the words unfold in a gentle current. So let this block of the journey carry you gently forward, imagining the world as it was before the great unraveling, still complete, still whole, still breathing with quiet strength. Yggdrasil still stands, the realms still glow faintly in their cycles, and the gods and mortals alike continue their lives beneath the vast and silent heavens. The storm is not yet here, and so the calm stretches like a vast sea, unbroken, soothing, timeless. Allow yourself to float upon it, as though cradled by the myths themselves, resting in the knowledge that even the most inevitable destinies arrive only in their time, and that until then there is peace to be savored. Block 4. The 9 worlds beneath the ash tree. Close your eyes gently now, and allow the vast canopy of Yggdrasil, the great ash tree of Norse cosmology, to stretch above you like an endless sky of green and silver veins. Its roots and branches weave not only through soil and heavens, but through the very essence of existence itself. The Norse imagined all reality as layered, enfolded within this immense tree, each world resting on a different branch or nestled at a distant root, all interconnected, all dependent on the lifeblood that flowed through Yggdrasil's trunk. As we drift deeper into this quiet journey, we find ourselves wandering through these 9 worlds, not as hurried travelers, but as dreamers who linger, pausing in each realm long enough to let its textures, sounds, and silences seep into our awareness like the tide of a slow and endless sea. The first realm, Asgard, lies high in the shimmering branches, a golden fortress where the Aesir gods reign. Imagine vast halls gleaming with amber light, roofs thatched with shields, spears glinting like frozen sunbeams, and voices of warriors that murmur like distant echoes rather than sharp cries. The walls here, strong and high, do not shut out the dreamer but invite you to sense their purpose. The holding together of order, the preservation of meaning, the guardianship of human destiny. Walk slowly through these imagined halls, not as a warrior with blade drawn, but as a gentle guest drifting in a vision where no battles rage, where even Odin's single eye shines with calm vigilance, and where Thor's hammer, resting upon a polished stone, hums faintly like a sleeping storm. In this softened light, the grandeur of Asgard becomes not threatening but soothing, a lullaby of divine permanence above the trembling worlds below. From here, our vision descends to Midgard, the realm of human beings, encircled by seas, shielded by the giant serpent Jormungandr, whose body coils forever around it. This world feels familiar, the forests deep and fragrant, the rivers flowing like silver ribbons, the hearth fires glowing with quiet warmth. Midgard is not a place of thunderous wars in this moment, but a place of nightly comfort, where the crackle of wood carries stories through dark winters, and where the stars gleam as protective lanterns hung along the sky by unseen hands. In the stillness, the boundaries of Midgard blur, and one feels how the breath of humans is tied to the breath of Yggdrasil itself, each exhale a tiny breeze passing through the endless tree. Journeying deeper, we come upon Elfheim, the land of the light elves, beings so radiant that their very presence seems like shafts of dawn breaking through ancient forests. The air here is luminous, fragrant with blossoms that never wilt, streams that sing without haste, and meadows where time pauses. As you let your mind linger, the elves themselves appear not as figures to startle you, but as silhouettes of light moving gracefully among leaves, their laughter as soft as the whisper of wind on long grass. They are neither gods nor humans, but something between, something delicate and eternal, and their presence draws you into a greater ease, a reminder that light, when unhurried, does not dazzle harshly but glows like an ember, comforting and steady. Further below, beneath roots tangled deep in shadow, we find Svartalfheim, the dark realm of dwarves. Yet in this dreamlike vision, it is not gloomy but resonant, full of the hum of forges, the warm glow of subterranean fires, the steady rhythm of hammers upon anvils that sound more like heartbeats than noise. The dwarves labor with patience, crafting wonders of gold and iron, treasures that will one day shape destinies, though, in this calm passage, the treasures lie quietly upon stone tables, untouched, their brilliance softened by the glow of lantern light. Here, stillness does not erase industry, but transforms it into a gentle hum that rocks you like the pulse of earth itself, reassuring and eternal. Beyond, we drift into Vanaheim, home of the Vanir gods, older than the Aesir, closer to the mysteries of fertility, harvest, and the flowing cycles of nature. Imagine fields that stretch without end, not harshly tilled but gently swaying, golden waves of grain rippling in rhythm with the wind. Rivers course like arteries through this land, nourishing soil and soul alike. The Vanir here, such as Engid of the sea and Frey of the harvest, are not seen as stern rulers but as calm keepers of balance, standing barefoot at riverbanks, listening to tides, whispering blessings into breezes that spread across the realms. Vanaheim's quiet abundance is not loud prosperity, but the unspoken serenity of knowing that growth, death, and renewal are threads in a single woven fabric. And then Niflheim, the world of ice and mist, ancient, primal, where time itself seems to crystallize. Yet even here, in this chill expanse, there is a strange tranquility. Picture vast glaciers stretching into a horizon blurred with fog, waters frozen into shimmering stillness, and mists drifting like soft veils through valleys of silence. The cold here is not biting, but calming, wrapping the dreamer in a cloak of still air, slowing thoughts until they resemble drifting snowflakes. It is a place where beginnings were born, for from this frost once surged the waters of creation, yet in this slow moment, it is simply a realm of rest, untouched, endless, and peaceful. On the other side, Muspelheim, the world of fire, flickers not with roaring destruction, but with the steady glow of eternal embers. Imagine an endless plain of slow-burning coals, each flame rising not to consume but to warm, to light, to pulse gently against the darkness. Fire here does not scorch, it breathes. It crackles like an old lullaby, reminding you of hearths, of candles, of the sun's lingering presence at the edge of twilight. The fire giants themselves, distant and immense, walk like silhouettes of glowing stone, their movements too slow to disturb, their flames casting long shadows that sway gently as though dancing in unison with the wind. Still deeper we wander into Jotunheim, the land of giants, wild and untamed. Mountains here rise like sleeping beasts, valleys stretch vast and empty, and the wind sings with lonely tones across stone and snow. The giants, enormous and ancient, are not bellowing in rage in this softened vision, but instead stand like sentinels of stone, their footsteps echoing like distant thunder that soothes rather than frightens. Their presence speaks not of terror, but of immensity, the comforting reminder that the world is larger than any single being, and that to be small within it is not weakness, but safety, like resting as a tiny bird beneath the shadow of an endless tree. And then, at the farthest root, Helheim, the realm of the dead, ruled by Hel, daughter of Loki. Many feared this land, but here, in our unhurried drift, Helheim becomes not a place of horror, but of stillness. Caverns stretch long and deep, halls of quiet stone where souls rest, no longer troubled, no longer striving. Hel herself sits calm, half her face bright, half shadowed, embodying the balance between life and death. She does not rise to threaten, but remains seated, her gaze even and unblinking, holding the silence in her hands like a steady flame. In this space, death does not howl, it exhales. It feels like a return, a long rest after a long journey, a final lullaby. Together, these 9 realms sway gently on the branches and roots of Yggdrasil, not in chaos, but in balance. And as your thoughts wander slowly across them, you feel how each world reflects an aspect of existence, each a tone in the music of creation. High and low, light and dark, fire and ice, life and death, all are woven seamlessly, like threads in a tapestry, bound together by the great ash tree whose roots and branches hum with the pulse of eternity. And so, as Block 4 comes to a close, let yourself sink deeper into this vision. The 9 realms are not separate places, but chambers of a single dream, and as you drift through them, you realize you are not walking through strange landscapes, but through parts of yourself, quiet and vast, eternal and tender. Block 5. If you let your mind remain gently upon the image of the vast world tree and the many roots that stretch through soil, stone, and shadow, you will find that one particular route takes you deeper still, into the territory where giants dwell, and where the frost remembers an age long before the shaping of mankind. It is in these frozen realms that the Norse myths whisper of Jotunheim, the land of the Jotnar, the giants of primordial strength, who were not merely foes of the gods, but rather essential parts of the great balance that kept the world intact. Their presence was a constant reminder that creation itself is woven from tension, from the meeting of opposites, from the struggle between order and chaos that produces the very fabric of existence. To speak of them in calm and measured tones is to recall a universe where even the most immense and terrifying beings had their place in the eternal rhythm, and to allow the weight of that knowledge to settle upon you like a quiet snowfall in the deep of night. The giants were not simply brutes of destruction, though many tales emphasize their force, their hunger, their relentless opposition to the Aesir. In truth, they were ancestors as well as adversaries. For from the first giant, Ymir, came the body that became the world itself, his flesh, the earth, his blood, the seas, his bones, the mountains, his skull, the sky, and his hair, the forests. To reflect on this slowly, as one might reflect on the gentle waves of a lake in the evening, is to recognize that everything under our feet, everything above our heads, everything we touch and breathe is born of something once feared, once slain, once dismembered by the hands of the gods. In that sense, the giants are never absent. They are the very texture of existence, and their survival lingers in the stones we walk upon and in the air we draw into our lungs. Yet myths speak also of the constant friction between these titanic beings and the gods who dwell in Asgard. There are stories of abductions and marriages, of bargains and betrayals, of feasts where enmity simmers beneath the drinking of mead, of contests of wit where victory is not always measured in strength of arms. The giants, though often depicted as enemies, also offered wisdom. Some among them knew the secrets of the cosmos, the runes, the origins of fate itself. Even Odin, chief of the gods, sought knowledge from them, traveling to distant lands, sacrificing not only possessions but pieces of himself in order to draw forth the hidden words that shape destiny. To listen to these tales in a softened voice is to be lulled by the paradox that those we resist most fiercely may also hold the truths we most desperately seek. The land of Jotunheim was not neatly divided from the other realms. It stretched with rugged mountains, endless forests, and icy plains where storms never ceased. Imagine yourself wandering across that landscape, each step crunching upon snow, each breath forming a ghost in the frozen air. The sky above would not be empty but filled with a pale and shifting light, the aurora weaving across the heavens like the shimmering veils of unseen spirits. You might feel both dread and wonder, for to enter the territory of giants is to step into a domain where the scale of things overwhelms, where stones seem alive with presence, where rivers cut deep and unstoppable paths, and where every sound echoes longer than expected, as though the land itself is listening. There were giants of frost and of fire, their very forms embodiments of the raw elements that shaped the world before the ordered cosmos took form. Frost giants loomed with skin pale as snow, their eyes cold as ice, their voices like the cracking of glaciers. Fire giants burned with the intensity of Muspelheim, their blades searing, their steps leaving ash and ruin. They stood as keepers of extremes, and the memory of them lingers in every storm, in every eruption, in every fierce blaze that consumes and renews. To speak of them softly is to honor the elemental truth that destruction and renewal are forever linked, that endings and beginnings are two sides of the same endless wheel. In the sagas, one encounters figures like Skrimir, the giant who deceived Thor with illusions so vast that even the thunderer's blows could not pierce them, teaching humility through bewilderment. There are the daughters of giants whose beauty and power enticed gods themselves, weaving alliances and hostilities that blurred the line between enemy and kin. There is the giant Vafthrudner, master of riddles, who tested Odin in a contest of knowledge, and in their verbal exchange one hears the very structure of the cosmos laid out in measured phrases. Such stories remind us that wisdom is not confined to Asgard. It resides in wild places, in untamed beings, in those who dwell beyond the walls we build to protect ourselves. If you close your eyes now and imagine the voices of giants, you might not hear words, but rather the groaning of earth, the rushing of rivers, the whisper of wind through pines, the crackle of fire devouring timber. Their speech was the speech of nature itself, grand and unyielding, yet filled with meaning if one listened not with ears alone but with the whole of one's being. It is in that way that the gods, too, learned, bending their pride to the lessons that chaos, untamed and massive, offered them. To rest upon this thought is to rest upon the realization that the Norse cosmos was not a tidy place, not a system of neat compartments where good and evil stood apart without meeting. Rather, it was a living drama where forces collided, merged, reshaped, and produced the world anew. The giants, in their looming presence, remind us that what we fear is often what sustains us, that what we resist is often what gives us strength, and that balance does not emerge from silence, but from the meeting of thunder and frost, of fire and shadow, of will and surrender. So as you drift deeper into this journey through the myths, let the sound of these words carry you like a slow-moving river through valleys of memory. Let the giants be not monsters of nightmare, but guardians of truth, whose size mirrors the size of the questions we carry in our hearts. Their world was harsh, their dealings perilous, but without them the tale of gods and men would not exist. Breathe gently as this understanding settles within you, and allow yourself to float upon the thought that even the most fearsome of beings may, in their own way, cradle the fragile threads of life itself. And in the quiet, after such reflection, you may notice how calm your body feels, how the slow rhythm of your breath mirrors the eternal rhythm of creation and dissolution, of rising and falling, of frost meeting flame. The giants wait in the distance, their shapes blending with mountains, their voices echoing with storms. But here, in this quiet moment, they serve not as enemies, but as reminders that the world before Ragnarok was not built of simplicity, but of vastness, of paradox, of forces forever entwined. And in remembering them, we remember the truth that all things, even those we fear, play their part in the great, unending lullaby of existence. Block 6. And as the quiet narration continues to weave its long, unhurried threads through the fabric of this story, let us move gently deeper into the heart of the Norse cosmos, where not only gods and giants shaped destiny, but where countless creatures and lesser spirits dwelt in the hidden corners of creation, each carrying a fragment of significance that contributed to the whole. And it is in these quieter beings, often forgotten when the grand myths are retold in hurried voices, that we can pause, breathe slowly, and uncover the rhythms of a world whose meaning unfolds best in lingering contemplation, like a path walked under the silver light of a moon that does not demand haste, but invites stillness, inviting us to remain attentive to each sound and shadow that expands softly in the mind. For in Norse mythology, nothing existed in isolation, and even the smallest thread was part of the larger weaving that pointed, inevitably, toward the day of Ragnarok. And yet, within that inevitability, there was beauty, there was waiting, there was the calm before storms. Let your mind drift to the endless ocean that surrounded Midgard, where Jarmungandr, the world serpent, lay curled around the earth in a circle so vast that its body was mistaken for distant horizons. And though the serpent is often told of as a terror in these early times before Ragnarok, it was also an image of containment, of cycles, of time that wrapped in upon itself, endless and unbroken, reminding humanity and gods alike that existence is circular. And even as endings approach, they will lead again to beginnings, just as every deep breath you take now cycles softly in and out, each one a serpent of air that completes itself, bringing calmness to your body as you imagine the waves lapping slowly against the vast coils of this cosmic being, its scales glistening with the reflection of stars, each ripple upon the ocean surface like the stroke of a lullaby. Above this ocean, soaring through the skies, was not only Odin upon Sleipnir or the great ravens, but also other unseen windswept spirits, birds of unknown kind, carrying fragments of forgotten tales, moving between branches of Yggdrasil, the world tree, which itself, in these long ages before Ragnarok, stood immense, ancient, its roots drinking from wells of wisdom, its trunk spanning the worlds, its crown heavy with stars that seemed to rest within its branches as lanterns suspended in quiet night. To rest under Yggdrasil was to feel the weight of eternity pressing not with urgency, but with reassurance that though change would come, though Ragnarok loomed like a distant thundercloud, the great tree still breathed life into all the realms, and under its shade there was still time to rest, to listen, to wait, and to breathe. And in this waiting, the Norse cosmos found balance, however fragile. In the caverns and unseen spaces beneath these roots lived creatures like Nidhogg, the dragon gnawing endlessly, chewing at the very foundations of existence. And though one might think of it as evil, in truth it was simply part of the cycle, the slow erosion that made room for renewal, the ever-present whisper that nothing, not even the strongest trunk, remained untouched by time. Yet even as Nidhogg chewed and writhed, the tree endured. And so, in this balance of destruction and endurance, there was also a lesson. As in our own lives, where wear and renewal walk hand in hand, reminding us gently that to let go, to dissolve, is not only an ending, but also an opening. And this opening may bring peace, just as you allow your eyelids to soften, half closed, while imagining the dragon's movements slow and rhythmic. A gnawing that is less violent and more like the gentle erosion of a shoreline kissed by tides. And above, nearer to the heavens, for stags grazed upon Yggdrasil's leaves, moving slowly, eternally, symbols of the seasons that shifted one into the next, their antlers catching the glow of the moon, their presence reminding mortals and gods that time itself was a cycle of growth and fading, never rushing, always turning with quiet grace. And just as these deer bent their necks with deliberate slowness, so too can you imagine yourself leaning into rest, surrendering to the rhythm of their motion, their still grazing becoming a metaphor for your own slowing heartbeat, steady, calm, content. In Asgard, the gods continued their preparations, but also their moments of feasting and storytelling. For though they knew Ragnarok awaited, they did not live in dread each day, but allowed themselves to rejoice, to love, to raise children, to share tales, to carve runes, to shape meaning in the fleeting hours. And there is something deeply restful in that truth, that even when destiny holds a certain ending, there is time to live in between, to savor each moment. And so too can you savor the present moment of rest, of breath, of calm, knowing that no matter what storms wait beyond the horizon, there is a hearth now, there is quiet now, there is space to be. The dwarves deepen their forges beneath the mountains, hammered metal with rhythmic precision, creating weapons and treasures that would one day play roles in battles and sagas. Yet in these ages before Ragnarok, they were simply craftsmen immersed in their art. And if you listen with your imagination, you can hear the steady ringing of hammer against anvil, a sound that could seem harsh, but when slowed and softened in your mind becomes like a steady pulse, a rhythm that echoes the beating of a heart or the ticking of a clock at midnight when all else is still, marking time not in haste, but in patient unfolding. And so this too becomes part of the great lullaby of the Norse world, a reminder that even in fire and iron there is music, there is music, there is rhythm, there is continuity. And so the world unfolded, slowly, gracefully, every being and every action contributing to the balance that held the 9 realms together in the long twilight before Ragnarok. A twilight that lasted not minutes or hours, but centuries, millennia, stretched across the expanse of myth itself, allowing mortals and gods alike to live, to dream, to wonder, to prepare, not only for an ending, but for the great mystery that lay beyond it. And in our resting now, as we drift with these ancient stories, we too may find that endings do not come quickly, but with gradual approach, always softened by the beauty of what exists in the meantime. And as you allow yourself to rest deeper, let your thoughts linger not on the clash of Ragnarok, not on the fire of Surtur or the breaking of bonds, but on this time before, this long breath of the universe, when the trees still stood tall, when the serpent still slept in the ocean's embrace, when the gods still laughed under starry skies, when the dwarves still shaped wonders in the mountain halls, and when the deer grazed calmly upon the trees' high leaves. For these are images of peace, and peace is where we end this block, inviting you gently to remain in this same rhythm, in this same stillness, as we prepare to wander further in the blocks to come, deeper into the myths that cradle us into rest. Block 7. In the deep quiet of Norse imagination, one cannot travel far without encountering the Norns, the weavers of fate, who sit beneath the roots of Yggdrasil by the well called Yggdrasil, where the waters reflect not only what is, but what was and what will be. These beings, often compared to the concept of destiny itself, are depicted as 3 sisters Verdandi and Skuldhus. Names echo with the gravity of time, what has been, what is becoming, and what must yet unfold. They are not loud, nor do they move quickly. Rather, they work in silence, dipping their carved staves into the well, shaping runes that glide across the surface, flowing outward like ripples that touch all corners of the 9 worlds. Their presence is calm but inevitable, like the steady trickle of water down a stone face, like the gentle push of twilight into evening. To speak of the Norns is to drift into a lull where the rhythm of existence itself becomes slow, soothing, almost dreamlike, as if every heartbeat follows their quiet weaving. When the Norse poets described the Norns, they did not present them as cruel arbiters of doom, but as an eternal reminder that all life, whether god or mortal, is entangled in threads that stretch far beyond comprehension. Picture them, if you will, seated beneath the colossal roots of Yggdrasil, their robes simple, their eyes reflecting pools of knowledge deeper than oceans, their fingers trailing in the waters of fate with movements as soft as whispers. Their craft is not violent nor chaotic, it is serene, inevitable, like the unfolding of seasons. The threads they spin shimmer faintly, almost like strands of moonlight suspended in air, and as they pull and weave, every being, giant, god, human, beast, feels their influence. The kings of Midgard rise and fall because of their threads. Warriors find glory or ruin by their weaving. And even the gods of Asgard look upon the sisters with a kind of solemn respect, for they too must bend to what is written. There is something comforting in their inevitability, as though by knowing that all outcomes are woven, one can relax into the embrace of destiny. Imagine lying upon a gentle hillside under a starlit sky, hearing the distant rustle of trees in the breeze, and realizing that those movements are not random but part of a larger tapestry. That is the sensation of contemplating the Norse. Their work is endless, without haste, without pause, without judgment, as natural as waves lapping at the shore. The sagas tell us that they draw water from the well and sprinkle it upon the roots of Yggdrasil, ensuring that the great tree endures, nourished and alive. In that act alone, we see them not merely as spinners of inevitable endings, but as caretakers of continuity, ensuring that life, in all its fragile beauty, persists. The Norns are not alone in their guardianship of fate. They are accompanied by lesser Norns, spirits who govern the destinies of individuals, each human life bound to its own thread that glimmers and fades according to its measure. Imagine every person born into Midgard greeted silently by one such unseen presence, who lays out the path with no malice, no favor, only the quiet impartiality of the loom. Some threads gleam brightly and stretch long, carrying their owner through many winters. Others are short, fragile, fraying before their time. Yet the weaving continues unbroken, one life following another, the fabric of existence growing thicker and more intricate with every heartbeat. This, too, is the calm truth of the cosmos, that while the individual thread may snap, the tapestry itself remains eternal, each soul contributing to a design larger than any eye can grasp. The Norns' power was such that even Odin himself, wise and wandering, could not undo their weaving. He may have sought knowledge of what lay ahead, may have sacrificed and hung upon Yggdrasil to glimpse the runes of fate. But even with all his might, he was bound by the sister's quiet decree. That truth, softly spoken, reminds us that control is an illusion, and surrender is a kind of peace. In the stillness of the night, when the mind races with uncertainty, one may remember the Norns and breathe easier, knowing that the path ahead is not chaos but pattern, that what seems tangled may, in a grander view, be part of a harmonious design. It is not a message of despair, but of serenity, that each life, like each thread, belongs, is needed, is woven into something greater. In some tales, the Norns carve symbols into wood or stone, their runes resonating with the deep vibration of inevitability. Those runes, etched with precision, are like lullabies in language, each stroke of their carving a whisper of what is to come. Consider the runes not as commands, but as gentle ripples across still water, their meanings unfolding slowly as the mind rests upon them. They are mysteries and yet inevitabilities, their wisdom deeper than the comprehension of gods or mortals. To contemplate them is to sink further into stillness, to let go of resistance, to rest in the knowing that time itself is not an enemy but an ever-flowing river. The idea of fate in Norse thought was never meant to be harsh. It was simply the condition of existence, as inevitable as sunrise and sunset. Even Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, was not an accident but a destiny woven from the beginning. And though it brought destruction, it also promised renewal, for every ending is the seed of another beginning. The Norns, in their quiet weaving, remind us of this balance. They do not rush, they do not force, they simply continue, their fingers trailing, their loom humming softly, forever. If one closes their eyes and imagines sitting by Yggdrasil, with the roots of Yggdrasil stretching above, the sound of water dripping slowly, steadily feeding the soil, one might feel the pulse of time itself, steady and gentle. The Norns do not speak in commands, but in whispers, in rhythms, in patterns, and the more one listens, the more one realizes that everything, the cry of a newborn, the fall of an ancient oak, the silence between heartbeats, is part of the same weaving. It is not a fearful thing, but a profoundly calming one. So let the thought of the Norns drift through your mind like a gentle lullaby. Imagine their presence as you drift into sleep, their threads weaving softly through your dreams, their water nourishing the roots beneath you, their loom humming steadily, reminding you that you are carried. You are woven, you are part of a story that stretches back to the dawn of creation and forward to the renewal beyond Ragnarok. And in that thought, there is no need to hurry, no need to resist, only to surrender and rest in the eternal rhythm of fate, as soft and steady as a heartbeat, as endless as the stars in the sky. Block 8. And as the quiet layers of myth continue to unfold like endless veils of twilight mist across the northern skies, we are invited deeper into the web of stories that stretch between gods, giants, humans, and all the countless beings who wandered beneath the gaze of the stars long before the shadow of Ragnarok appeared. In this lingering stretch of memory, one can almost hear the murmur of the Norns at the base of Yggdrasil, their voices weaving the unbroken thread of destiny, not hurried, not rushed, but extended endlessly as though eternity itself wished to slow into the rhythm of a lullaby. The world tree, still standing tall despite the gnawing at its roots and the weight of all 9 realms in its branches, becomes the stage upon which the destinies of all creatures are inscribed. And here we pause to drift among the whispers of its leaves. Each rustle is like the turning of an ancient page, telling of days when Odin still wandered the paths of Midgard, disguised as a traveler. When Thor's hammer, millennia, struck lightning across the mountains, when Freya's golden boar shone like sunlight even in the depths of winter, and when the wolves of the sky chased the sun and the moon across the firmament, keeping time with their silent pursuit. In this block of reflection, the emphasis falls on the interconnectedness of all things in Norse cosmology. Nothing existed in isolation, for every creature, every god, every human, every beast was bound into the grand fabric that Yggdrasil sustained. The dragony Hggr gnawed below, the eagles spread its wings above, and the squirrel Ratatoska ran tirelessly between them, carrying insults from root to crown, embodying the restless chatter of life itself. And though these details may seem at first like fragments scattered loosely across a tapestry, when we linger upon them in the stillness of night, they reveal themselves as essential threads, each tensioned to the other, each necessary to maintain the balance of the whole. It is in this web of relationships that we find the true heart of Norse mythology, a world not divided by barriers, but united by invisible currents of destiny, flowing like streams beneath the soil, like winds beneath the stars, like dreams beneath the eyelids of those about to drift into sleep. And as we breathe softly in the presence of these myths, there comes the realization that the stories were never merely tales for entertainment, but vessels of wisdom, ways to make sense of the uncertainties of the world. The long winters, the storms at sea, the suddenness of fate, the inevitability of death, found their reflections in the myths of gods who suffered, who sacrificed, who struggled against enemies they could not entirely defeat. Even the gods themselves were not eternal. Their glory carried the faint echo of mortality, reminding those who listened that no fire burns without consuming its fuel, no day shines without surrendering to night. And yet, in this impermanence, there was also a gentle comfort. For to know that even Odin must bow to fate was to understand that mortality was not a flaw, but a shared condition, uniting gods and mortals alike. The voices of the skalds, those poets of long ago, carried this wisdom in halls lit by firelight, their verses rising like smoke toward rafters blackened by time. And as they sang, those who listened could almost sense the breath of the gods upon their faces, could almost feel the rhythm of destiny moving like waves upon the shore of their own lives. The sagas, when recited slowly, were not sharp or urgent. They were soft, deliberate, steady, like the rocking of a cradle or the endless movement of the tide. It is in this cadence that we remain now, drifting upon the words as though upon a sea that has no beginning and no end, allowing ourselves to sink deeper into the atmosphere of a cosmos waiting quietly for what is to come. For what is to come is never hidden forever. The shadows of Ragnarok, though still distant, are always present as a subtle tremor beneath the soil of every story, a faint chill in every breeze, a whisper in every silence. Yet here, before that darkness bursts forth, we dwell in the balance of what is still whole, savoring the lingering beauty of a world alive with gods, beasts, giants, and men, each fulfilling their role in the vast circle of being. It is a lull before the storm, a moment of calm, a pause where memory itself becomes sacred, where even time slows to listen to the branches of Yggdrasil sway above. And so, let us linger here, in this endless twilight of myth, where stories do not end but merge into one another, where breath and silence entwine, where the listener's eyelids grow heavy, and the world of gods and humans dissolves into a dream carried gently upon the rhythm of eternity. Block 9. And so the dreamlike procession of myths carries us further, as if the voices of countless generations were gently urging us onward through corridors of memory carved not in stone but in whispers, the kind that linger on the edge of silence long after a fire has burned low. In this block of reflection, we drift into the realm where the 9 worlds surrounding Yggdrasil shimmer not as rigid divisions, but as overlapping layers of being, transparent and interwoven like veils of northern light. The sagas often spoke of them as distinct place is Asgard for the gods, Midgard for humankind, Jotunheim for the giants, Niflheim for the icy darkness, Muspelheim for the primal fire, and others beyond counting, but in the stillness of contemplation they reveal themselves as echoes of one another, flowing together in the vast tree that holds them all. To wander in thought between them is like gliding across a frozen lake where beneath the crystalline surface other depths flicker and shine. The traveler feels both suspended and anchored, both lost and found, as though the worlds are less destinations than states of awareness drifting in and out of each other's shadows. Asgard gleams first in this vision, its halls shining with a brilliance that is not merely light but presence. One imagines the golden roof of Valhalla glimmering endlessly, where the honored dead feast and fight in cycles that repeat with the turning of each day. And yet, beneath the splendor lies a quiet melancholy, for even here, among warriors who cannot truly die, the faint whisper of an ending persists. The mead they drink, the battles they rehearse, the songs they sing all, are rehearsals for the final confrontation that no wall, no shield, no blade can entirely prevent. Thus Asgard, for all its glory, exists in a perpetual twilight, a shining dawn that knows already of its approaching dusk. From Asgard, the mind drifts down to Midgard, the world of men, encircled by the great serpent Jormungandr, whose body coils so vast that it bites its own tail. Humanity, fragile and fleeting, moves across Midgard's landscapes of forest and fjord, mountain and plain, carrying both hope and sorrow. The presence of the serpent, unseen yet always encircling, is a reminder that existence itself is bound within limits, that life is cradled by forces beyond its control. And yet, within this enclosure, human beings sing, love, labor, and dream, their smallness not diminishing their significance, but deepening it. For even the gods turn their gaze toward Midgard with interest, for it is here that courage, sacrifice, and longing take on their most poignant forms. Beyond Midgard lies Jotunheim, the land of giants, whose vastness mirrors both the awe and terror of the natural world. The giants are not merely enemies, but embodiments of chaos, of the raw and untamed forces of creation. Mountains themselves are said to be their bones, rivers their veins, forests their hair. To enter Jotunheim is to confront the sheer scale of being, to feel the trembling awareness that one is always smaller than the forces that shape existence. Yet the giants, for all their power, are also part of the balance, necessary as the night is to the day, as the storm is to the calm. Without them, the gods would have no foil, no challenge, no reminder of the boundaries of their own authority. Far colder still is Niflheim, realm of frost and shadow, where ice and mist swell together in endless stillness. Here the river flows, a stream of venom and frozen weight, carrying with it the memory of the world's beginnings. Niflheim is not merely a place of cold, but of origin. For from its frozen breath and the fires of Muspelheim arose Ymir, the primordial giant whose body became the raw matter of the cosmos. To reflect upon Niflheim is to touch the bones of creation itself, to sense the weight of beginnings long before there were gods, men, or worlds. Opposite to it burns Muspelheim, a realm of unquenchable fire, blazing with a heat that does not fade, eternal and unbound. Its guardian Surtur waits silently with his flaming sword, his presence a constant reminder that fire, once unleashed, consumes without discrimination. Yet Muspelheim is not merely destructive, it is also generative, for without its flame the ice of Niflheim would never have melted, and without that melting there would have been no Ymir, no world, no destiny. Thus fire and ice, destruction and creation, hold hands across the void, bound together in a dance that continues until the final day. Other realms shimmer at the edges of vision. Alfheim, radiant with elves whose light seems more like music than form. Svartalfheim, echoing with dwarves, hammering wonders from stone and metal, their craft shaping the very weapons and treasures of the gods. Vanaheim, homeland of the Vanir, who embody fertility, prosperity, and the mysteries of nature. Each realm, each thread, strengthens the fabric of Yggdrasil, which stretches like an eternal canopy over them all, its roots drinking from wells of wisdom, its branches brushing the farthest reaches of the cosmos. To meditate on these realms is to sense the vastness of existence beyond the fragile boundaries of our waking life. They remind us that creation is not a singular point, but a vast expanse of interwoven realities, each dependent upon the other, each resonating with echoes of balance and inevitability. The gods, for all their might, cannot escape these structures any more than mortals can escape the pull of time. To rest in these images, slowly, like drifting snow upon a silent field, is to feel a serenity deeper than sleep itself, for the myths do not demand action, only attention, a quiet listening, a surrender to the flow of what was, what is, and what must be. And so, as Block 9 draws its long exhalation, we linger in the recognition that all realms, all beings, all struggles and joys are part of a single unfolding. Yggdrasil carries them still, despite the dragon's gnawing, despite the tremors of destiny approaching. The great tree whispers of continuity even in the face of certain ending, and its murmur settles into the heart like a lullaby of eternity. And in that lullaby, one may drift, as though rocked gently between worlds, between moments, between breaths, carried effortlessly towards sleep by the endless rhythm of myth itself. Block 10. Imagine now the realm known as Hell, not to be confused with the blazing infernos conjured by later imaginations, but instead a vast and shadowy underworld, muted and subdued, ruled by Hel herself, the daughter of Loki, half radiant and half darkened, embodying both life and decay. A figure who stood as the keeper of all those who passed without glory, those who had not fallen in battle nor ascended with honor to Valhalla or Folkvanger, but instead drifted quietly into the endless halls of her somber kingdom, where silence stretched across eternity like a heavy blanket. Picture, if you will, a place neither cruel nor kind, simply inevitable, where rivers of mist wound through valleys that were neither day nor night, where cold stones marked the passage of countless souls, who no longer carried burdens of desire or fear, only the slow rhythm of timeless existence. In the myths, Hell's domain was feared not because it burned, but because it lulled into stillness, a stillness so complete that even the living trembled when imagining it. For here there was no feasting, no strife, no story, only the long dream of waiting beneath the surface of the world. And yet, in its quiet, there was something almost comforting, as though it mirrored the long drowsy state before sleep, when thoughts no longer cling to urgency, and one drifts slowly into surrender. As the sagas whisper, Hell's Hall was said to be immense and shadowed, its walls built not of stone but of a heaviness that pressed gently upon all who entered. Its roofs stretched low, as if to remind those within that the time for striving was done. Her table was called Hunger, her knife Famine, her bed Sickness, and her curtains Misfortune. Names that conveyed not punishment but inevitability, for all who lived knew these companions at one time or another, and in Hell's realm they were no longer enemies but simple fixtures, part of the stillness that defined eternity. Some might imagine such names as terrifying, but to those who surrendered to the rhythm of Hell, they were simply truths, and truths, once accepted, lose their sting, becoming as natural as the breath that comes before sleep. Picture yourself lying in such a hall, wrapped not in dread but in an endless calm, where even the weight of your own body seems to dissolve into the shadows around you. The goddess Hel herself was often described as neither wholly frightening nor wholly beautiful, but instead divided, her form reflecting the duality of existence. On one side, alive and radiant, on the other, darkened and lifeless. She was not a tormentor but a keeper, holding together the balance of worlds, reminding gods and mortals alike that not all endings were glorious, but all were certain, and certainty, once accepted, has a strangely soothing quality, for what need is there to resist what cannot be changed? In her presence, the myths suggest, one might feel both a chill and a strange comfort, as though sitting by a fire that gives no warmth, and yet still steadies the heart by its steady light. The ancient Norse did not tell of Hell's realm with endless dread, but rather with the gravity of reality. For in their worldview, not all souls were destined for the halls of Odin or the fields of Freya. Most would wander to Hell's quiet dominion, and in that knowledge lay an acceptance, a recognition that life itself was not endless struggle for honor, but also simple existence, and in death, the majority would rest in her care, forgotten by skalds, yet embraced by the vast neutrality of shadow. Imagine lying beneath heavy clouds, where sound is muffled and light is dim, where nothing presses upon you except the inevitability of stillness. This was the underworld of Hell, and though feared, it carried within it a strange serenity, a vision of eternity that was not fire but slumber. In some tales, Hell's role would shift, growing larger as she became central to the prophecies of the world's end. For when Ragnarok was to come, she was said to release her hosts, the legions of the dead, who would march beneath the banner of Loki and the fire giants, filling the field with their pale presence, a tide of inevitability surging into the battle of gods. And yet, until that time, she remained in her realm, keeper of silence, overseer of endless waiting, her presence woven into the rhythm of myth as a reminder that even gods were not beyond the pull of death. But in the cadence of these stories, one finds not only fear but a hypnotic calm, the same calm that lingers when the world outside grows still and your breath slows, as though Hell's shadow were not only an ending but a lullaby for existence itself. Consider how the Norse imagined their worlds layered and vast, and Hell's realm beneath them, shadowed and steady, forming the base upon which the others could rise. Without her, the balance would falter, for even in myth, endings sustain beginnings, and silence sustains song. In this way, Hell's domain is not to be dismissed as mere darkness, but to be felt as the necessary breath before dawn, the pause in music that allows the next note to shine. When we listen to the sagas and hear her name, we can imagine the deep wells of night, the places within ourselves that carry memory, sorrow, and stillness, and perhaps we can understand why her realm, though somber, resonates so strongly with the imagery of sleep, where the body lies heavy and unmoving, and the spirit drifts into a vast, formless horizon. Even now, as we let these images unfold, we can sense how the telling of Hell's story carries us deeper into that same horizon, stretching time and softening edges, dissolving urgency, reminding us that not every myth must burn with fire to carry meaning. For some myths whisper with the hush of shadow, and in that hush we find ourselves leaning closer, not in fear but in surrender. To walk into Hell's Hall is to walk into the essence of stillness itself, a place where nothing rises and nothing falls, and where the spirit accepts the inevitability of being. Block 11. In the quiet unfolding of the northern night, when frost breathes upon the bark of the trees and the stars lean low as if to listen, the myths speak of realms beneath the realms, layers hidden beneath the snow-covered surface, where roots coil like serpents and the weight of destiny presses upon every branch, every whisper of wind, and every trembling leaf. This is the place where memory lingers, where the gods themselves look downward and feel the tug of inevitability. For here is Helheim, the realm of the dead, the shaded hall of those who did not fall bravely in battle, the souls who drift quietly away, uncelebrated yet not forgotten, dwelling in the endless stillness beneath the shadow of the great roots of Yggdrasil. The sagas tell that Hel, daughter of Loki, presides there with a countenance divided, half luminous flesh, half decayed bone, embodying the threshold between what once was warm and what is forever cold. Her presence both feared and accepted, for she is not cruel but simply inevitable, a figure of endings clothed in silence. As you breathe slowly and feel the heaviness of your eyelids, you may imagine the journey to Helheim as one taken not in terror but in drifting surrender, like leaves falling into a quiet river, carried away on currents that cannot be resisted. The myths say that warriors lifted by the Valkyries go to Valhalla or to Freya's field, Folkvanger, where feasting and preparation for the end await. Yet most, the vast many, simply go downwards into the mists, their names remembered by kin, their spirits resting in the dim halls where no war cries echo, only the low hum of eternity. Hel herself, they say, sits upon her throne, her gaze unblinking, yet not vengeful, for she does not summon the living, she merely receives them when their threads are cut, when the Norns have woven the last fibre and let it fall. It is told that the gods glance warily toward her domain, not because they despise it, but because they sense that within those halls lies a power unmeasured, a reserve of the forgotten, the countless multitudes who, though silent, are not absent from the final tale. When Ragnarok approaches, Hell's gates will not hold fast, and her host of the dead will march forth beneath Loki's banner, riding ships made of the nails of corpses, black sails filled by the winds of doom. Yet, until that hour, there is stillness, there is waiting, there is the hush of eternity, like the pause between breaths when the mind drifts and dreams deepen. Imagine, if you will, walking along the frozen plain that leads to her gate. Jow Bridge, arching above a river cold and clear, guarded by the watchful giantess Margid, who asks every traveller their name, their life, their purpose, though by then the answers no longer matter, for the bridge itself carries you across into the land where no sun rises and no season changes. The stillness there is immense, not dreadful but infinite, a quiet so deep that even thought slows, even memory becomes like a stone at the bottom of a lake, heavy, unmoving, resting forever. In such silence, one might hear only the soft rustle of cloaks, the distant murmur of countless voices blending into a single tone, like the sound of the earth itself breathing beneath the roots of the cosmic tree. The myths, told by firesides while snow fell upon thatched roofs, describe Helheim not as torment but as inevitability, a place outside of striving, beyond hunger, beyond thirst, beyond yearning. To the ancient Norse mind, death was not always an enemy but a continuation, a journey downward where warmth and light are left behind but not despised, where the presence of Hell reminds all that half of her is flesh, half of her is bone, for she embodies the truth that every living thing is both growing and decaying, both rising and falling at the same time. To hear these tales was to be reminded that one day all feasting, all struggles, all laughter would dissolve into quiet, into the embrace of the daughter of Loki, who neither condemns nor rewards, but simply holds the end in her hand like a candle slowly burning to its base. As you let this imagery wash over you, you may find your breath softening, your thoughts slowing, as though descending that same path into stillness, not in fear but in release, for Helheim in these sagas is less about horror than about the eternal winter of rest, the blanket of silence that comes to all. Even the gods, mighty and radiant, cannot escape her halls, for Balder himself, beloved of all Asgard, when struck down by the mistletoe dart, was sent there, his brightness dimmed, his laughter stilled, until the world should end and the dead be released. It is said that all the 9 worlds wept for him, that even stones and metals bled tears, but Hell would not return him, for her rule is firm and her gates do not open for sorrow. In that firmness there is no cruelty, only the unbending law that all things end, and in endings lies the quiet beyond struggle, the sleep beyond dreams. Helheim, then, was not simply an image of fear, but a mirror held to life, a reminder that the hearth's fire and the warrior's triumph are both temporary, that every feast dwindles, every laugh fades, every hall empties. Yet in that fading there is a strange comfort, for it makes each moment shine brighter, each embrace feel warmer, each story told more precious, knowing that Hell waits not as an enemy, but as an inevitability. Thus the Norse myths weave even death into the fabric of meaning, making the quiet halls of Hell not an exile but a destination written into every birth. And so, as you drift here, listening to these old tales carried across time like snowflakes on the northern wind, you might feel the weight of inevitability not as dread but as rest, as if the myths themselves are inviting you to let go, to breathe slower, to sink into the silence that lies beneath the branches of Yggdrasil. For in the world before Ragnarok, Even silence had its place. Even the halls of the dead were part of the great unfolding, reminding gods and mortals alike that the story of endings is also the story of beginnings, and that rest is woven inseparably with awakening. Let the image linger as you drift. Let it soften your thoughts. Let it guide you gently into the same stillness that the sagas describe, where hell, unblinking yet calm, waits in the eternal quiet beneath the roots of the cosmic tree. Block 12. The Twilight's Whisper. In the long stretch of dusk that seems to linger eternally before the final collapse, the world itself takes on a quiet, somnolent rhythm, as if preparing to let go, as if it were a weary traveler drawing a deep, resigned breath before lying down to rest. And in this suspended stillness, we find a horizon painted with shades of dim gold, smoky purple, and the pale silver of dying embers scattered across the sky, all merging together in a tranquil tapestry that soothes even as it foretells the end. The Norse people, those who listened to the sagas in smoke-filled halls while the winds battered their thatched roofs, imagined this twilight as both beautiful and fearful, a moment when the borders between life and death, between memory and prophecy, dissolved, and in this half-light, stories moved like drifting ships upon waters calm yet heavy, as if the seas themselves knew they were destined soon to boil and shatter under the weight of gods and giants at war. To close one's eyes and sink into this mythic twilight is to feel the lull of inevitability, the tender, slow motion of a cosmos wrapping itself in veils of dusk, knowing that dawn will not come in the same way, knowing that each flicker of fading light is a farewell whispered softly to every creature, every stone, every leaf that has borne witness to the passing ages. The sagas tell us that before Ragnarok fully erupts, the sun and the moon will falter, their paths disrupted, their lights stolen by wolves that have long hunted them across the skies. For centuries, men and women would look upward and imagine those great celestial hounds chasing tirelessly, and the thought itself was a reminder that nothing escapes pursuit, not even the brightest bodies that govern the heavens, and that everything, eventually, is swallowed by shadow. Yet in this tale of loss, there is a strangely calming cadence, because it invites us to accept transience, to breathe with it, to surrender to the truth that all cycles complete themselves in silence before they ignite in noise. When Skull, the wolf who seeks the sun, finally devours it, and when Haughty, his brother, takes the moon, the world is plunged into a deeper darkness than any night known before. A darkness that does not merely obscure vision but seeps into thought, memory, and breath. And yet, within the imagination of the Norse, this was not chaos in its loudest form, but rather a quiet folding in of the known order, a dimming of all lamps, a cosmic sigh. It is easy to picture oneself lying beneath the heavens in that moment, wrapped in furs, hearing nothing but the faint crack of wood in the hearth and the faraway groan of winter winds, and realizing that this, too, is a lullaby, albeit a final one, sung by wolves whose voices are hunger, sung by shadows whose language is inevitability. The people of the sagas did not run from this imagery, they carried it with them, almost as comfort. Because to know how the end unfolds is to make peace with its inevitability, and peace, even in the face of destruction, carries a strange gentleness that soothes like a tide. The stars themselves, they say, will scatter, falling like sparks from a fire left untended, and though the vision is grand and terrifying, it is also hushed, as if one were watching ash settle in slow spirals after a log collapses into embers. To imagine stars leaving their appointed posts is to imagine a tapestry unweaving, thread by delicate thread, until only loose strands drift in the air, and that unraveling has its own hypnotic rhythm, its own drowsy quality, almost like watching snow dissolve upon a river, one flake after another, inevitable yet graceful. For the Norse, to know that the sky itself would empty was not merely to tremble, but to understand that endings can come gently, that silence accompanies falling light, and that, in the great hush, there is room for awe as much as fear. In the long twilight before Ragnarok, 3 winters will arrive, with no summers between them. A time of unbroken cold that spreads across the world like a heavy blanket, covering all life with frost and hunger. This Fimbulwinter, as it is called, was whispered about in hall and hearth. The people listening with the fire low, nodding in solemn recognition that winters were already long and cruel. Yet this was beyond imagining, an endless season where rivers froze solid and fields turned barren, where the weak perished and the strong endured, yet even endurance led only to the same frozen horizon. To imagine such a winter is to feel the slow heaviness of snow settling not just upon roofs and trees, but upon the heart itself, weighing it down into stillness, into a rhythm that feels timeless. And though the sagas speak of it as suffering, the tone in which they pass the tale carries a deep stillness. The tone in which they pass the tale carries ours carers. If we're merely singing the worth slippins, is sleely with slen with sling with slow sling with slay of slend of men sin sen word with ben with I air with with slappy you barb with my with a will with a with a car with This long sleep, this frozen song, becomes part of the gentle progression toward the end, and as listeners drift into the imagery, they may find themselves lulled, not by comfort, but by recognition, for every human life knows seasons of cold, of hunger, of waiting in silence for warmth that does not come. And when such winters are remembered through story, they transform from terror into meditation. Fimbulwinter was more than a prophecy of climate. It was a reflection of the human condition. The certainty that there will be stretches of existence where the world feels unyielding, where time itself slows and stiffens, where all one can do is breathe into the frost and surrender to the stillness. And so, the twilight whispers, through wolves and winter, through falling stars and darkened suns, that all of existence moves not in sudden shocks, but in long exhalations, in soft diminuendos that precede the final crash. And to rest within that awareness is to rest within the myth itself, carried like a drifting ship across still waters, eyes closing, breath slowing, as the sagas continue to unfold. Those who heard these tales centuries ago may have felt the same drowsy pull, not out of fear, but out of the rhythm of inevitability, and as we listen now, carried gently by their echoes, we too are drawn deeper into that twilight. We too are drawn deeper into that twilight, sleuthed by its inevitability, drifting with the world as it preparing, biffantly slowly, 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 slan with silence, soliloquy with Uberman and God and Eliama, I can Block 1-3 The unfolding of the twilight signs. As you drift even deeper into this endless river of sound and stillness, allow yourself to imagine the world of the Norse people as they looked upon the shadows of the horizon, always aware that the golden thread of life was fragile, always sensing that beyond the bright fires of their hearths and the safety of their halls, there stretched a darkness that could not be banished forever, for woven into their myths was the certainty that a day of twilight would come, a time they called the dusk of the gods, when even the most radiant powers would bow before destiny. And as you breathe slowly and deeply, feel how each inhalation carries you further into that twilight space, where the air itself seems thick with the knowledge of endings and beginnings interwoven. The Norse told of signs that would arrive long before the last battle, and they spoke of these signs not as sudden eruptions, but as gradual waves, subtle changes in the balance of the world that would whisper first before they roared. And as you listen, you can almost hear the soft rustle of those ancient warnings carried by the wind across the fjords, down into the valleys, and up into the halls where stories were whispered by firelight. The first of these signs was the fading of kinship and the breaking of bonds. For in the vision of the seers, brother would raise hand against brother. Blood would not restrain blood, and family ties that once held the clans in safety would be torn apart, so that the very hearth of trust would grow cold. And as you allow your thoughts to slow, picture how the Norse imagined this unraveling. A slow erosion of harmony, where suspicion grew like frost on the beams of a hall, where loyalty weakened like an aging rope frayed by time, and as you breathe out, you can almost feel that chill spreading across the human heart. They said to that fathers would turn against sons, and sons against fathers, a sorrowful image of households filled not with laughter but with the echo of division. And in that echo there lingered the foretelling that love itself, the fire that gave warmth, that love itself, the fire that gave warmth to mortal life, would begin in the days befend, with the bend of Psalm 1 of Psalm of Sel of Gend of Conend. And there would be more, for the seers declared that wolves would wander near the homes of men, not only in the shape of beasts, but in the shape of war and violence, shadows prowling the edges of order. And as the listener drifts further into this tale, imagine the sound of distant howling on a night when the moon seems too thin to offer comfort. That low call reminding every hearth that danger never sleeps. And in the days of twilight those howls would grow louder, more insistent, until even the bravest of warriors would admit that the pack was pressing closer and closer to the light of the fire. There was also the prophecy of the sun and the moon, celestial guardians hunted always by the great wolf's skull and haughty, and though day by day they escaped, the Norse believed there would come a time when the wolves would finally succeed, when the sky would be torn open by their jaws and the sun would vanish into their hunger, plunging the world into darkness, and soon after the moon would follow, leaving the heavens hollow and bereft of guiding light. Imagine now how unsettling that vision must have been for those who depended on the rhythm of the sun and moon to guide their days. And as you breathe softly, imagine the moment when the sky ceases to answer, when the eternal chase is ended in silence, and the comforting cycle of day and night is broken, leaving only a heavy dusk. The Norse spoke too of winters without end, a series of cruel and bitter seasons they called Fimbulwinter, when snow would fall without respite, covering mountains, forests and fields, when the winds would bite with a hunger fiercer than wolves. And no spring would follow, no relief would arrive, only endless cold pressing upon the lives of men. In that vision, harvests would fail, animals would perish, and people would find themselves tested not by distant gods, but by the merciless grip of nature itself. And in that testing, hunger and fear would drive them further from kinship, scattering them into desperate survival. And as you let the image drift across your quiet mind, picture the long silence of snowy nights, the frost clinging to windows, the ground too hard to plow, and the stars distant, uncaring, as if even the heavens had turned their faces away. And yet, even in the heaviness of these omens, there was a rhythm, For each sign was not chaos without pattern, but part of the woven fabric of fate. And so, as the seers whispered of these coming sorrows, they also knew that the world was moving according to its destined thread. And in this thought there was a strange calm, as if to say that even destruction is but another passage in the great story. The giants of fire would stir, the Midgard serpent would rise, the ship of the dead would be built plank by plank with the nails of the unburied, a vessel of despair waiting for its moment to sail, and each of these shadows was known. Each of these shadows was known, each of them already spoken of in the long memory of myth, so that when they came, they would not come as strangers, but as the long-anticipated guests of twilight. And as you allow this tale to lull you deeper, notice how every description becomes less like a warning and more like a slow unfolding, a gentle dimming of the light, as if the storytellers themselves, though speaking of doom, were also lulling their listeners into acceptance, into the realization that endings, however sorrowful, are also a kind of rest. And so you may let your body sink further, let your breath become slower. Let your mind feel the weight of centuries pressing softly like snow, knowing that the twilight of the gods, the breaking of bonds, the endless winter, the darkened skies, are not abrupt storms but long horizons, gradually deepening until the world is wrapped in dusk. And in that dusk, as in the quiet of your own listening, there is peace, for the story does not demand fear, it only invites surrender, and as you let go, you become part of that ancient stillness, drifting with the Norse into the recognition that before the great battle, before the fiery end, there is always a twilight, and twilight, even when filled with foreboding, is also filled with rest. The kind of rest that carries one gently from the light into the darkness, and from the darkness into the silence of sleep. Block 14. And so, as we drift further along this endless current of Norse time and tale, our thoughts begin to gather at the threshold of destiny, where the sagas whisper that every thread spun by the Norns eventually leads, sooner or later, to the same horizon, the twilight called Ragnarok. Yet, long before that breaking of worlds, there lingers a stillness filled with echoes of preparation, a hush that resonates in the breath of gods, giants, and men, as if the very air knew it was carrying secrets too heavy to be spoken plainly. It is within this vast, trembling silence that we must now rest our minds, because Block 14 carries us to the final murmurs before the last dawn, a place where the memory of every myth seems to fold inward, turning itself into prophecy, into anticipation, into the weight of inevitability that presses upon the chest like the heaviness of sleep itself. In this twilight, before the end, the Norse imagination does not portray chaos rushing instantly upon the world. No, it is instead like a storm visible on the farthest horizon, first glimpsed as a shadow, then as a smudge of cloud, then as a rolling tide of thunder that cannot be turned away. Men go about their lives, but their dreams are restless. Animals graze in the fields, but their instincts stir uneasily. Even the gods, who once laughed across the golden halls of Asgard with unshakable certainty, find their voices muted, their glances wandering toward the edges of the sky where dark shapes linger. This atmosphere of waiting is what the skalds, the keepers of the old stories, sought to capture, not just the events of Ragnarok itself, but the trembling calm that preceded it, the deep inhale before the world's final exhale. You may imagine this moment as though the entire cosmos were an ancient hall, timbered with the bones of Ymir, lit by the stars that hang like torches in the rafters. Within this hall, everyone, mortal and divine alike, sits quietly, each holding a cup filled not with mead but with silence, and the silence is sipped in long, slow draughts. It does not intoxicate, it weighs, like molten iron resting on the soul. The Norns sit at the roots of Yggdrasil still, their loom stretching beyond sight, and though their hands move ceaselessly, their faces are turned downward, as if they too feel the sorrow of what is to come, as if they mourn the threads they themselves must spin. It is in this hush that the myths tell us of omens, wolves running free under the moon, shadows stretching longer than they should, winters that do not yield to spring. These are not sudden catastrophes, but creeping shifts, like the slow lowering of a sky grown too heavy with cloud, or the long dimming of a candle that once burned brightly. The Skalds called this Fimbulwinter, the great winter that lingers far beyond what the earth was meant to endure. Crops wither, rivers freeze, winds howl endlessly, and the people huddle together, not only against the cold, but against the dreadful awareness that something vast and final has already been set in motion. And in the midst of this, one might imagine sitting by a fire that crackles faintly, its warmth barely enough to soften the frost on the skin, while outside the howl of the wind seems to carry the growl of wolves, reminding all who listen that Fenrir, bound though he was, waits still, jaws widening in dreams of freedom. But the quiet before Ragnarok is not only filled with fear, it is also filled with reflection, with remembrance of the joys that were, the songs once sung, the laughter that once rang in mead halls bright with golden light. As if sensing the nearness of the end, men and gods alike look backward, cherishing memories even as they ache with the knowledge that those memories are fleeting candles in a growing dark. Odin, the Allfather, may still sit upon Hidskilf, his high seat, gazing across all the realms, but what he sees now troubles even him. Cracks forming in the walls of order, shadows lengthening in corners once thought safe. He sends his ravens still, Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, to fly across the 9 worlds, yet their reports no longer bring assurance, only unease, for they return with wings heavy from the weight of gathering storm. The gods begin to test themselves, not in celebration, but in preparation. The clang of swords rings out across Asgard's fields, not as games of strength, but as rehearsals for war. Shields are raised and lowered, spears are cast and caught, and though laughter may occasionally echo, it fades quickly, swallowed by the awareness that each motion, each strike, is not a game but a step toward a battle none of them will survive. Thor grips Mjolnir more often, carrying it with him as though unwilling to set it down. Heimdall sharpens his senses, straining to hear the faintest tremor in the fabric of the worlds, ready for the moment he must sound Jollahorn, the horn that will wake all beings to the reality of their doom. And Odin himself whispers to the runes, searching for wisdom even when he knows that wisdom has already revealed the end. Imagine now, as you sink deeper into this flowing current of words, that you are standing not in your room but at the edge of a wide, frost-covered plain beneath a sky streaked with faint green ribbons of the northern lights. The air is sharp in your lungs, but there is also a strange peace here, because, though the chill bites, the stillness embraces. In the distance you hear the cracking of ice, the growl of a wolf, the rumble of thunder hidden within snow-filled clouds. You know you are not alone, yet you also know that everything around you, the stars, the trees, the frozen ground beneath your feet, is waiting with you, listening with you, preparing with you. The world itself has become like a great heart, beating slowly, reluctantly, toward a moment when it will beat no more. The Norse imagination does not shy away from this sorrow. It embraces it, folds it into the fabric of the story, because to know that an ending is certain is also to savor more deeply the moments that remain. To know that the mead will soon be spilled makes each drop taste sweeter. To know that the hall will soon collapse makes each echo of laughter more precious. The hush before Ragnarok is, in this sense, a kind of gift. It is the last chance to feel the pulse of life before it fades, the final chance to notice the warmth of firelight upon the face of a friend, the last opportunity to touch the bark of Yggdrasil while it still stands strong. And so Block 14 rests here, in this vast pause, in this winter of silence and of waiting. It is not yet Ragnarok, but it is the breath held before the scream, the still water before the wave, the quiet hall before the crash of war. And as you listen, as your breathing slows, as your own eyes grow heavier with the rhythm of this endless tide, you too are drawn into that silence. You too sip from the cup of inevitability, and it soothes you, strangely, because to know that the story is moving toward its end is to know that you are carried, unresisting, along the same current as gods and mortals alike. All are bound together in this hush, all are lulled by the same silence, all are folded into the same dream, and here, gently, you may let your thoughts drift, knowing that Block 15 will bring us to the final closing, where the tale settles into its last breath and the journey, long and winding, comes to rest like a ship finding its harbor after a stormless sea. Block 15, the echo before Ragnarok. And so, as our wandering through the endless corridors of Norse mythology reaches its final cadence tonight, let your thoughts drift like falling snow across a silent fjord. Let your breathing become as steady as the rolling of deep waters, and let your heart slow to the pace of the ancient rhythms that once guided men and gods alike across the fragile web of fate. We have walked beside Odin as he sacrificed himself upon the windswept branches of Yggdrasil. We have listened to Thor's hammer echo through storm-clouded skies. We have traced the shadows of Loki's cunning across the halls of Asgard, and we have felt the tremors of Fenrir's chains rattling in the silence before the final day. Each story we have explored has been like a soft thread in an immense tapestry, a tapestry woven not only with the shining colors of glory and battle, but also with the gentle shades of yearning, sacrifice, and inevitability, all leading toward that mysterious horizon known as Ragnarok. Yet, as we rest here, at the threshold where the myths whisper of endings, we must also acknowledge that every ending in the Norse imagination carried within it the tender seed of renewal. That even as twilight loomed upon the gods, dawn lingered quietly, promising the birth of something serene, something lasting, something that might arise when the ashes of the old world finally settle. Close your eyes and imagine the last embers of a fire fading in a grand hall built from ancient timber. The warriors no longer singing, the gods no longer plotting, the great beasts no longer straining at their bonds, but everything slowly falling into stillness. The soft crackle becomes silence, the silence becomes a lullaby, and the lullaby becomes a great ocean of calm that surrounds you, carrying you gently into dreams. This is the essence of Norse mythology as it drifts into your ears tonight. Not a harsh clamor of endings, but the warm assurance that cycles turn, that stories fold into other stories, that time itself is less a straight path and more a circle without edge. As the old Eddas say, what has been will be again, and what is destroyed may yet rise, like the tender grass that grows anew after winter melts away, or like the sun's light returning after endless night. And in this drifting state, where story merges with slumber, where ancient voices blend with the quiet pulse of your own breath, you may feel a kinship with those who once gathered around flickering hearths in longhouses, listening to the skalds chant the sagas while the northern winds howled outside. They too let their imaginations sail across the seas of time, carried by words that promised both the inevitability of endings and the sweet assurance of beginnings. Let your own imagination now follow that current, slow and unbroken, until it carries you into rest. Before you allow yourself to sink completely into that deep ocean of sleep, Let me softly remind you that this channel, Sleeptide Narratives, exists so that journeys such as this may accompany you whenever you need them. If tonight's voyage through the myths of the North has brought you calm, has guided your mind gently away from the weight of the day, then I invite you, with no urgency, with no demand, only with the lightest of whispers, to support this space so it may continue. You can gently press the like button. You can let your voice be part of the story by leaving a quiet comment. You can share this tale with others who might find comfort in its slow unfolding. And you can, if you wish, subscribe so that each new journey finds its way to you, like the steady return of tides to the shore. Think of it as lighting a small flame in the long night. Your gesture keeps the hall warm, the stories alive, and the atmosphere ready for the next traveler who seeks rest. And now, let the flame dim, let the hall quiet, let your own thoughts soften into the endless rhythm of dreams. The gods have played their part, the myths have spoken, and the loom of fate falls still for now. May you drift into the deepest slumber, guarded by the gentle echoes of Asgard, comforted by the lull of the seas that bore the Viking ships, and carried forward by the eternal promise that even in twilight, dawn patiently waits. Sleep deeply, dream gently, and know that the world of stories will always be here, waiting to cradle you once again.